I'm the Global Advocacy Director at Bacardi. I'm a New Zealander currently based in London, 20 plus years in the drinks industry and wearing many, many hats, which is why I've had to move to black and white photos. So I've been a bar owner, a bartender, a brand ambassador, a brand owner, and now based at Bacardi. I head up a team, lead a team around the world that focus we very much believe in the value of education, advocacy, in product knowledge, and in fact just category knowledge as a way to drive the industry forward, to steal share from wine, beer, and make people drink more spirits and cocktails, and in doing so grow our brands in the process. I originally started with some very, very small startups, so to give you a sense of just how much I passionately believe this, I got my first brand job working for a small startup brand. I was employee number 3 20 years ago, working for a small vodka startup. So to give you a sense of the value that my founder placed on education, he hired himself, who was in charge of marketing, and then a distiller, and then somebody to go out and talk about the product and to educate. So for any of you who are working for small startups and probably feeling like education and advocacy are a luxury, I'm here hopefully in the next 10 minutes to convince you that it's not the case. And even to give you some context, I've been at Bacardi nearly a decade now, and when I started we had 32 people working in brand education and ambassador roles. We now have 10 times that. So to give you a sense, whether a brand has been around 150 years or 1.5 years, there's a really strong and powerful value in education, in reaching consumers, obviously, although I'll try not to use that word today, but also in reaching bartenders who are the gateway to your end user, to your drinker, and are often going to be the first adopters as well. So what's driving premiumization? There's a couple of things. We've obviously got some big demographic trends over the last 20 years. So there are literally just more people. Incomes have been going up over the last 20 years, although that's not necessarily a given that that will continue. But there's probably two big drivers, I think, that have driven this premiumization over the last 2 decades, and why I'm very bullish that premiumization, economic headwinds willing, will continue. That's professionalization of the bartender. So the craft of the bartender has become a much more compelling vision for young people. It's been, there's a whole lot of skill and knowledge which people now look for, and they have a much stronger social currency. That's not unique to bars. You can also see this in coffee shops with baristas, that sort of thing, but it's been a real driver of premiumization, because when people go in and look at thinking perhaps I'd like to spend a little bit more on a drink, the staff that they're talking to, the bartenders and the servers, have the product knowledge and the category knowledge to be able to make those recommendations. And then the other component, I think, is drinking less but better. Oh, sorry, Emily. Anyway, the slide was up there, you read it. So drinking less but better, which I think is a really important driver as well. So total alcohol consumption per person is falling very, very significantly, but the spend that people are willing to pay is going up, right, in total. So that's a really, really powerful opportunity, and I think a very, very good one. It's better for people's health, for them to be drinking much less than they used to, and because they are now drinking less and they're drinking in less occasions, they want each one of those occasions to be much more meaningful, and that means that they're prepared to put in time, energy, and money into ensuring that each one of those occasions is really, really valuable, and that to me is the biggest driver of premiumization. Now that people have got the time and money to spend on it, they're looking for the stories, the events, the drinks experiences that are worth paying more for. And very simply, that is what premiumization is, right? Giving guests in a bar, or giving your end user, your consumer, if you like, the opportunity to pay more for, and convincing them that it is worth doing so. Obviously, a martini at the Connaught is certainly worth paying more for, even at £26 these days, which I think is, well, once upon a time that was a lot of euros, but I think that's probably now like €2.20. But anyway, to give you some context, I mean, this is an experience, right? And this has very much been the driver in the industry, is going into bars, restaurants, looking for unique products that you may not have tried before, delivered in drinks experiences that you may not have had before, and willing to pay the premium, because cocktails have now become an entertainment, if you like. They've become a hobby, a leisure activity for people, and they in turn kind of drive the spending. And it's a very, very powerful driver. The other component that premiumization is also driving as well, for those of you who work for brands, is there are 3 main drivers to whether your bar and restaurant partners are profitable. The first is, do they have people coming in the door? And over the next 12 to 24 months, that's going to be very, very challenging. People are going to be going to bars and restaurants less often because they want to save money. Then the next component is, do bars and restaurants, are they able to serve everybody that's in there that wants to have a drink? Which is efficiency, comes to skill level and product knowledge, and we know that that has been a real challenge over the last couple of years as staffing constraints have come in. But where you can help if you're work for a brand or you're a brand owner is allowing the third biggest driver for bars and restaurants in the on-premise is getting people to pay more per head spend, and that's helping make up for the fact that they can't currently be open as often as they would like, and they can't, and ensuring that every single person that comes in and asks for a drink is paying the maximum that they are willing to pay. So, how do we do this? Well, we've got 3 examples at Bacardi that I'd like to pay attention to, I think. And so the main way to build premiumization is typically be around for 200 years and leverage a long and very, very consistent iconic brand. That's the situation with brands like Hennessy and Macallan. But if many of you work on brands or you own brands, I'm sure you're hoping to exit slightly more quickly than a 2-century time frame. So I've got a couple of examples here from Bacardi that were within kind of the lifespan of those of us in the room who've been in the industry. And the first is Bombay Sapphire, which came along in 1987. The gin category was a little bit moribund at this point, and Bombay had a very, very simple premise, which is a really simple product differential, which is if gin is botanicals, then surely more botanicals would be better. And if you want to talk about botanicals, really talk about them. So put them on the outside of the bottle so that people know exactly what's gone into it, and then follow it up with education, and that becomes the driver. And this is a real live example for me, because when I started bartending in 1999, I knew nothing about gin except that gin and tonic paired well together. And by cleaning the Bombay Sapphire bottle on a Sunday night in a quiet shift, I read every single one of those botanicals, and all of a sudden I bluffed my way through being able to upsell to different brands, and primarily driving it through Bombay Sapphire. I then went to an education class where these botanicals were actually brought home to life, so we could actually see these in front of us. We took all of our staff and we switched most of our menu at that point, which was rum, bourbon and vodka, and turned it into a gin menu, and that was in 1999, all off the back of like a really powerful, clear, easy to understand product differentiation. So that was a significant premiumization in the category. Of course, Morris is going to talk about how Hendrix came along 10 years later and did to Bombay what Bombay had done to every other brand, but we'll get onto that one in a second. Next one is Grey Goose Vodka. Again, a really, really simple product understanding. Vodka is basically the taste of its raw ingredients, nothing else. And nobody really talked about those ingredients. So Grey Goose unlocked a huge amount of value both for their bar partners and the brand owners by explaining exactly what ingredients had gone into it and where they'd come from. Simple fact of provenance. And then finally, a really live example, if you own a bar or you're in a bar right now, you've probably heard about the agave boom. There's many people who can claim success, that be part of that success, but Patron, I think, is a huge part of that. And there's a very, very simple product differential again. 1% of all tequila at the time that Patron was launched was 100% agave, so almost all tequila had some kind of additive or some kind of shortcut. Patron had a pretty simple idea. If tequila is the taste of agave, then don't add anything to your tequila except agave. And that, of course, has been a brand which has unlocked so much growth in the industry. So 3 simple live examples. Okay, so we've got those examples in front of us, so how do we actually steal from those? Well, a couple of years ago, I was lucky enough to go to Harvard Business School, and the most important thing you learn at Harvard Business School is you have to let people know that you went to Harvard Business School. But there was a very, very simple proposition. We actually did a whole session on premiumization, and they used something called the value stick, which is sort of how much does it cost to produce your ingredients, how much are you able to sell it for, and then is there any gap, right? Which is brand value. What's the increased willingness to pay that people are able to find? And if you can unlock that through storytelling and through this kind of creation of small moments, luxuries, and exceeding the expectations of your end user, of the guest, then that can be incredibly powerful. So how do you do that? Well, the first is obviously clearly define your product versus your competition. Work out who it is that you're referencing against and give people a pretty clear understanding that for some specific intrinsic reason you have created a product that is better than anybody else's, and then educate about that. Make sure that you're focusing on exceeding the expectations of your guest. So again, ensuring that your product shows up consistently all the time, that you've got a really, really clear drinks differentiator, so you understand what the drinks are, that you're able to go through there. And then probably the other one as well, which I don't think many startups struggle to do, which is clearly understand and define what is the particular drinking moment that that you feel your brand is most suited to, and really work hard to try and own that, whether that's the aperitivo hour, whether that's the margarita in the case of Patron, whether it's the gin and tonic for Bombay or now Hendrix, whether it's what is the situation, what's the particular moment that you're trying to own, and really, really zero in on that and educate around that. And then finally, these days, align with cultural movements. So work out who out there in the industry and beyond the industry is talking about things which are relevant to the user you're trying to find, and then clearly make sure you overlap with them. Cool. On to the next slide, sorry. All right, so how do you do this? Well, clear differentiation, first of all. So do you clearly understand for your product, and are you able to express in a single sentence what is it that you're doing differently to other products that are around there? Because that's where you unlock so much of the value. So for example, 42 Below, there wasn't much differentiation in the vodka category, but we tried all the time to try and sort of add extra pieces of differentiation that made us stand out. So the first was we were from New Zealand. We thought that was a differentiator enough, but it turned out that most people in the Northern Hemisphere didn't know where that was. So the next thing that we did, almost all vodkas were 40%, so we bottled our vodka at 42%. Again, so that every single time, every single one of our salespeople, every single one of our ambassadors was able to clearly articulate that simple product difference. And then we would keep stacking differentiation on top of that. Consistency, doing the same thing. Never underestimate how hard it is for bartenders and other advocates, people who want to talk about your brand, to forget the thing that you think makes you different. So doing a lot of consistent activity and activation and really reiterating those messages. Think like a luxury brand. Right, so you'll sometimes often hear people talking about, our spirit brands, so they belong in like sort of what we call fast-moving consumer goods like baked beans or toilet paper, or are they really luxury goods that people can enjoy? For me personally, it's very clear, they're luxury goods, right? Nobody has premiumized toilet paper, right? Because nobody really wants to talk about the product differentials, but people love to talk about something intrinsic, something that is made, such as spirits. Education, 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 a really, really clear, critical component. You can't be telling everyone about your brand, so you need to invest in bartenders, advocates, influencers who are able to tell your story for you, and the only way that they can do that successfully is if they clearly understand what it is you're offering. And then a mantra which we use often at Bacardi, which I constantly am trying to reiterate to brand owners and brand people: education drives appreciation, and it's appreciation, connoisseurship, that unlocks the value of premiumization. All right, one more slide, I think, or two more. So, okay, so what is the knowledge that you need to be able to give bartenders and advocates to be able to drive this trade up and to get them to spend more? Cool, so some simple stories. So provenance, clearly understanding where does it come from? Where is it made? What's the process? What are your raw ingredients? What's differentiated about them? In many instances, that might be simply geographical. Maybe you're the first brand to come from a particular town or a particular place. Maybe the first brand or the first spirit to be made using a particular ingredient. Clearly understand what it is that's differentiating you from the others. Who made it? What is the process ingredients, and how can you keep adding process components? Patron is a great example. They have a really, really powerful and continual story talking about every single step of their process that they go through. Lots of brands use similar parts of the process, but when you stack those 10 steps up, there's very few tequilas doing that, and so hence why they're taking so much of the value within the category. And then next one, sorry. Cool. And then finally, you need to clearly understand it's great to have lots of gimmicks. Being the only product from a particular place or from using a particular ingredient, but it's really important that you're able to clearly and easily able to articulate taste. What makes it great? Right? What will be the payoff for this worth paying more for? And is the language that you're using and the stories you're telling aligning with what guests are actually experiencing in the drink? And do you clearly understand what's the drinks that best show this ingredient off? What makes it taste great, how to drink it, and why. Cool? All right, and then finally, clearly understand who it is that needs to be talking about you to help you reach the consumer that you think is going to be willing to pay more for. So clearly, advocates, what are advocates, which are people on both sides of the bar, prosumers, drinks writers, etc. What is it that they need? They clearly need to understand some kind of ranking system. So, awards are a little overrated, but until you win one. So critically important to unlocking so much value, particularly for your premium SKUs, your premium products. Rankings, tastings are really, really important. Bartenders are the gatekeeper to reach your consumer, and they in particular allow people to have a very, very safe trial. So to try something in a very, very small instance, in a small unit, that allows them to, if they get it wrong or they don't like it, then little has been lost. But educate, and you lift the category up, and when you do that, it's incredibly powerful, and that's how you take so much of the value that people are prepared to pay, and I think over the next few years will continue to be prepared to pay. All right, cool. That's it from me for the moment. Yeah.